Welcome. My usual intro to the Catalyst rant. Look at those pearly whites from Derek Ing. Oh my goodness.
Teeth whitening commercial in your future, Derek.
Yeah. Derek, what brand are you using?
Yeah, what's your secret?
Whatever I saw was cheapest.
Like the whitening strips or just toothpaste?
No, I don't. I just use toothpaste.
What?
Yeah, just 2 for 1. Oh, sweet. I'll grab that.
There's no loyalty.
Huh?
No toothpaste loyalty in 2020.
No. They all taste the same, minty fresh. So.
Oh no.
No.
Trev's and I are from Cincinnati, so there's one and only toothpaste.
Really?
Yes.
Is it like?
Yes.
Okay. What is it?
Go ahead, Trevs.
Oh,
yes.
Taste.
Crest. Only.
Yeah.
Right.
I use Crest too. Look at all these.
I actually am not that loyal to P&G on that front. I'm sorry.
You're not?
No.
Oh, geez.
I don't even use their other I'm really bad actually.
Really? Like I grew up we only use Procter and Gamble products only.
Yeah, when I grew up that's how it was. And then I was like, hey, I'm like Derek and I get to make my own decision about what's cheapest.
2 for 1.
Wow, that's a bold statement. I'm like Derek.
Yeah, that's so guys, we are starting this episode extremely strong.
Sorry, Mariah.
No, this is good. We're starting it just jumping right in. Welcome to the Catalyst rant. This week we're boldly gonna go where so many people have gone before, but we feel like given where we're at in the world today and that we are 9 days away from an election, it is worth diving into the role social media plays in elections, politics, everything else. So obviously we're all familiar with social media. Some of us got our start in our career, such as myself, in social media. I think we've all grown wary of it. I think we've all had minutes, okay, let's be real, hours probably snatched from us.
Stolen.
By the clutches of a good social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram rabbit hole. And I'm sure we've all heard complaints about algorithmic echo chambers, or at least we've heard about them in the news. We've heard about things like Pizzagate. But when it comes to politics and influencing elections, we seem to give Facebook and the likes a free pass time and time again. So today, without digging into our own political leanings, we're going to dive into what we know based on our experience working on these platforms, so that hopefully we can help other people make better informed decisions when it comes to this year's elections. And of course, just wanted to note something important, and I'm not going to take credit for it because Trevor reminded me of this the other day. Ballots include, yes, important choices that will change the course of our nation, but also lots of core local issues. So super important for people to be informed when they go to turn their ballot in. So I kind of wanted to start the whole conversation with this fascinating stat that I found the other day. So did you guys know that 64% of Americans say they use social media? And get ready for this cognitive dissonance. The exact same number, 64%, say that it has largely negative impact on the nation. So
100% of these people.
So 64% say they use it, and then 64% agree that it has a negative impact on our country.
So 64.
Oh, is it 64?
It's just
ironically the same number.
No, it's just ironically the same number.
Okay, so it's like 64% of that 100 sample, 100% sample.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's just like, if you think about it, like, same for me, right? I have the same problem. Like, eating meat's probably bad, but burgers are delicious. Social media is probably bad, but I'm going to use it.
Yes.
So I wanted to kind of just open the conversation with any personal experiences that you guys have had with social media. Has it had an impact on your life in a negative way?
I'm going to share something, and I don't know how successful I'm going to be here. Right?
Ooh.
Is it on your phone?
Yeah. No, that's probably, well, I'll read it out in a second, right? So that,
Wait,
okay,
did
hold
you
on.
want it to be that?
Yeah, hold on, I'll read it to you. Basically,
Be
but-
careful. Be careful.
I know, you
This
don't
is
want
being
to,
recorded.
Weird.
you don't want to see this one. But basically, on YouTube, obviously, you know, you go into YouTube and you go down the YouTube rabbit hole and stuff like that. And I remember so this is not political or anything like that, but I got served a YouTube ad for Asian food in Mandarin, right? In the language Mandarin, and it's for a food I've never searched for in my entire life. And it's a language I've never searched in, right? So that was the ad that you kind of saw. Basically, two Asians speaking in Asian, eating Asian food. I've never searched for that in my entire life. On one hand, I'm like, it's a little bit targeting. On the, false targeting. On the other hand, I'm actually kind of impressed. They actually got to
That
that.
they found you.
They could actually find me because I came up, it was in a totally different language. I'm like, holy crap. They they must have worked out some way to find me. They just don't know I don't speak Mandarin.
It's AI, right? Isn't it facial recognition, like features and
Yeah. And I was like,
It's all that duck you've been ordering.
yeah. I just I don't know how YouTube eventually found out that I have a duck fetish. So,
But that's so interesting. So did you feel
that didn't sound good.
yeah. Did you feel like it was invasive, or were you were, and I guess maybe
Pleasantly surprised.
yeah, pleasantly surprised.
well, I wasn't going to buy
no.
the food. I had no idea what that food was in the first place. I was like, what the fuck are they eating? No, sorry. Beep it. But yeah, no, I was impressed up to a point because they had targeted it up to a certain point, but then they just got the last hurdle wrong. But I have to say, I was actually kind of really impressed. They actually got that far. Like usually you type in something Google, trips to Spain or something like that, and all of a sudden,
Or you say it out loud and then you get served something.
you get served something, and you're like, oh, okay. And then to bring it back to the original topic, you look at politics and stuff like that, and you can see how they're kind of gauging what sites you're visiting so they can serve you the right political ad. But I mean, they've got that completely wrong. I get kept serving. I'm not political. I can't vote. I'm legally allowed to be here, just in case anyone else.
And in case anybody looks you up.
Yeah.
There's this guy with really white teeth that I don't think
pretty
belongs
much.
here.
Yeah. But yeah, I get kept on serving political ads even though I'm not affiliated with anyone. So I'm just impressed about how the algorithms can work up to a certain point, and then it kind of gets it messed up for me a couple of times. You kind of look at it, but I'm impressed. I have to say, impressive.
Well, what about Robin and Trevor? Have you guys have you lost any friends on social media due to political discourse?
Ooh, we're going there, are we? I wouldn't say I've lost them, but I have proactively silenced them. I will say that on both sides, to be frank. Yes, it's shed a light on my friends that maybe it's good that I know, maybe not. Because would we talk about this if we were sitting down together? Odds are no. We would never even discuss some of the things that have been brought up. But yeah, I mean, but I'm also of the same thinking that the older you get, the more people you should weed out of your life. Like you realize there are people in your life that end up being toxic. So maybe it's a good thing.
I think it's so interesting. Just because I think there's two topics we can cover here, right? Which is the political ads. And just a reminder to everyone, right now, right, all of these companies, Facebook, Google, the likes, they are private companies. They don't actually have to adhere to the First Amendment. And they also don't have to be regulated. So they have no liability, right, for things like libel or slander or anything like that. So they're largely left to relegate themselves at the moment, which I think is just something important to note as we color this conversation. But for me, there's the ads, and then there's the people talking, right, about their beliefs and their things. So we'd love to kind of think about things from both angles. But Trevor, what about you? What are you seeing out there? How has this impacted your life?
I definitely don't remove anybody. I don't think I care enough to, I mean, honestly, I like hearing the other side, extreme or not. So it's usually kind of interesting just to get the perspective, whether I agree with it or not. It's always interesting. I think some people are louder than others, which I think from a silencing thing, I know how their little algorithm works for the most part. So I'm easy to just like skip the whole story, and then I know it'll get deprioritized in my my feed later on. So it's not necessarily like an active thing. It's like I'm just gonna ignore it for the most part. But yeah, no, I don't. It doesn't bother me from a personal standpoint. What everyone wants to say about anything, I guess.
Well, I do think it's worth noting, what was it that you made us watch, Trevor? The Great Hack?
Yeah, The Great Hack. So we watched The Great
Yes.
Hack and Social Dilemma. The Great Hack is much more political in nature. The Social Dilemma just came out recently, which is kind of talking about like the brainwashing side of social media and how it's kind of gamified and addictive on a very different level. The Great Hack is more, so it's a political standpoint of basically an ad agency, a very large one. Kind of, they were taking in a lot of data. So in my eyes, they're kind of, not to like throw Quantcast under the bus, but they're kind of like an old Quantcast where they had a bunch of cookies and a bunch of tags out there, and they were collecting their own first party data, combining it with a bunch of third party elements like Facebook and Google. And then that's kind of what made them proprietary. So it's not like a social, or it's not an ad agency in the respect of kind of how we are, where we are utilizing everybody else's platform, not necessarily being a data warehouse of our own. It is more of, they were a data warehouse. They collected their own data, parsed through it, and that was kind of their proprietary blend. And then they were using it to influence elections via modern day propaganda. So propaganda, as we all think of it, is probably like a poster on a telephone pole back in forever ago. And nowadays it's basically modernized where you're going to get a certain message based on what you specifically care about. And it's the same level of advertising we always want from our clients. They're saying, I want to reach this specific person because they meet all these requirements. Well, politicians want to do the same exact thing. And so they're kind of influencing political views as opposed to us influencing buying behavior. And, and the ethical standpoint of that is in question.
Well, and didn't they target like the people that were on the fence and going after those groups? I mean, it's really similar. I don't know if you guys watch the Netflix series, The Politician. By the way, so good. It's a comedy based on this guy that just keeps trying to win elections throughout his life. But they talk about that, you know, all these people that are sitting on their fence and trying to push them one way or the other. And how fair is that really when you have people that, you know, are just being bombarded with ads and to your point, Trevor, propaganda.
And I think the purposeful division is an interesting angle. So they talk about how, I mean, not only they're going after, what do they call them? Not the influencers, they had like a name for people that were receptive to the messaging. So kind of that middle ground. You're not an extremist left, you're not an extremist right. You're also not decisive enough in the middle. You're kind of on this like, you'll go either way. And so they've used the algorithm to decide who are the people that'll go either way. And they're targeting specifically those people. And they're creating division by like making one side the enemy and one side much more favorable. So it's not just to say, here's our political views and this is why you should vote for us. It's like the other side is the enemy and
yes,
why you should vote for us.
I don't understand why there's not a, like, I understand that, you know, you've got the rule that says they're not governed in any way, they can't be slandered or anything, or sued for slander or anything like that. But what I don't understand is that in the UK, whatever you put on wherever, YouTube, whatever like that, there's still a governing body that says this has to be true. And in order for you to put that on there, you have to provide substantiation from a third party that says what you're actually putting on is true. So it's not a First Amendment or whatever kind of thing. It's just basically, if you're going to show this to the public, you need to be able to back it up.
So I think the part of the catch there is, I don't think it was on accident that they chose a company outside of the US to represent the US politics. Now, so like, because of that, because it's not global enforcement, it's you pay respect to your national government's laws and regulations. We don't have World Wide Web regulations. Like, there's nobody that says, okay, you in Zimbabwe can't do something here. I mean, there is, but there isn't. I mean, they could bar us, but it's not like it's not kind of the same way that you would think about it. If it was a US company targeting US people, we could make kind of a criminal action associated with that, which is why they're going after Google, Facebook for not doing that on behalf of everyone else, to some degree. But I mean, to Mariah's point and the initial point, it's like, is that their responsibility? They own these platforms. We choose to use their platforms. I think that's a whole nother argument of kind of the ethical angle of that.
Right. Well, and I think, it's interesting because we could certainly spend a lot of time debating, even amongst ourselves, the four of us, whether or not Facebook should be, regulated, which I think we did in a previous episode, actually.
Plug episode.
Episode number, insert in the edit. Oh, wait, we don't edit. We keep it raw, guys.
Even F-bombs, Derek.
We keep it real for you. But yeah, no, so I think I'd love to kind of maybe focus this conversation around, okay, this is America. We gotta do it ourselves sometimes. So like, what are the things that just as conscious consumers of social media, right, we can do to make sure that we're not being brainwashed? Because, to a certain degree, I think we can all agree that the algorithm is set up, right, to keep us in a rabbit hole or an echo chamber, right? Because most of these are designed around taking your time, right? The more time that you spend on YouTube, the more money YouTube makes. So I loved this term surveillance capitalism, which was in the Social Dilemma. Right? People are trading in oil markets, they're trading in steel markets. People are also trading in behavioral markets, right? Can we tweak Trevor's behavior just ever so slightly so that he'll take an action that we want him to take? And when does that become, I guess, nefarious or not, is part of the debate. But now that we're aware of it, what's the next step for us, I think, is kind of where I'd like to maybe zero in. But Derek, to your point, right, Facebook recently issued a statement, and it was this: in the absence of regulation, Facebook and other companies are left to design their own policies. We have based ours on the principle that people should be able to hear from those who wish to lead them, warts and all, and that they and what they say should be scrutinized and debated in public.
That's not a policy. That's just like, I'm not doing anything about it. It's not exactly what we're doing. Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too sure if that's a policy or not, because basically in the UK, if you can't prove it, you can't put it on. You can't put it out there. That's it.
What's who's the governing body that controls that?
So it's called Clearcast, which is like it's basically it's part of the Broadcasting Association, right? Separate body. So for example, when I work on detergent, if you're going to say it cleans 3 times as more as that, you have to bring in your scientific data to show that it does clean 3 times more.
And Clearcast approves it.
Clearcast says, yeah, you go through like we used to have like 2 weeks of back and forth, because if they ever push something back on it, then our team would obviously go back to the lawyers would go back to the scientists would come up with more data back and stuff like that. I forgot which dish soap it was, but there's a really famous thing where it says this detergent cleans 10 times better than the nearest competitor, right? So they put that in there, and then the competitor said, that's wrong. It can't be that. So they challenged it, and then they had to provide more substantiation, and they actually found out that actually was like, it was 10 times better. So the competitors shot themselves in the foot, because they actually had to kind of prove that. And now that's the claim for the last 20, 30 years, 10 times better than the nearest competitor, and they still can't make it. So it's their kind of tagline. So yeah, it's a completely scientific governing body. When it comes to opinions, you have to basically say, here's my substantiation to prove that this opinion is actually fact.
Do you think that would work? Well, so to be clear, there are some regulations, right, when it comes to television and other apps.
Yeah.
It's really the social has kind of slipped in from the U.S. government's perspective, right? They've just taken too long to figure out what's going on social media.
7 years ago, though. In the UK, we changed it about 6 or 7 years ago to include social.
I know. The UK and New Zealand are better. We know less corona cases.
Derek reminds us daily.
That's all I want.
But I'd love to know, like, I mean, so do you think that would solve the problem?
Well, okay.
Remove the bias.
Well, let's take the political ads for a second, right? And I obviously won't mention names of the politicians, but if I see an ad nowadays that says my opponent is lying, right? My opponent, that person's ads, the things that they're saying about me, he is lying, right? So all of a sudden I go, I don't have a dog in the race. I'm like, one person says this, the other person says this. They both say they're lying. They're basically squabbling like children on social media. And there is no way to kind of go, unless I go off and do my own research, how do I know this person did this versus this person did this? Because they're basically just saying, you lied. And the other one's like, no, you lied. It's like a children's argument. So, but all of a sudden as a viewer, you kind of go, this is really strange because that person's saying one thing, that person's saying another thing. How did this get on air?
So what? Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Trevor.
I think that one's hard because that's a degree of truth. I bet there's truth behind both of them. So now it's like, with what percent of accuracy? It's like either of them didn't make it up 100% in most cases. It's like it's grounded in something, their interpretation of what happened or what the situation was. And they're kind of creating a narrative that associates with that little bit of truth. And then the other one does the exact same thing. But then somewhere in the middle is the truth. But it's what neither one of them are actually saying. And so it's like any argument we ever have ever. It's like, if you're being an extremist on either side of a story, the truth is probably in the middle. And that's where I think it gets hard. It's like, how do you regulate when actually neither one of them are correct and accurate in what they're saying? They're both extending the truth. They're both, in essence, lying. But in their eyes, they're just saying, no, this is my version of what is happening.
Yeah, but see, that's when it comes to actually a message for the public, like, I would be like going, okay, if you're saying that's not the truth, it's their version of the truth, right? And there might be a hint of truth in it, but largely it's a bit of an interpretation. I'm like going, well, give me the facts. This is why there's a whole kind of a thing where the media's like, well, this is like, well, this is like, well, if you can't give me
then
the
it
facts,
shifts to the facts, right? Doesn't it pull out of the arbitrary, it being arbitrary, and then it's focused on things that actually happen versus interpretations of things?
Where do you find it? I don't know where like Chris Evans launched a site that he says is non-partisan, but considering Chris Evans is quite partisan, to be fair, I kind of sit on the fence about that. But he said he wanted to launch a website that was completely non-partisan, so you can get your news from there. But you kind of go, everyone's got an agenda. I'm not too sure about that. But then you have these ads that are every day. You see it every day. Where do you go if you want to find the truth? Where do you go?
Well, I think
I
don't think that's what people actually want. Like, the 10 times as white or whatever, the example of like 10 times better, that's different than kind of a situation between politics, because I think you're selling to emotion. You can look up, here's what they want to do, here's their policy, here's kind of the do's and don'ts of every single one of them. But I could bet if you surveyed the US population, there is a fraction of a percent that actually reads, what does this person stand for that's running for a political office? So to say that they actually want the facts, I don't think anybody wants the facts. I think we're buying people. Like, we want personalities, and that's what we're kind of buying into, is not necessarily this, like, it's not always just like, this is what their policy and what they plan to do, and this is what I want. I don't think it's that cut and dry. So to have just only the facts exist, I think people would, it would not be what actually everybody wants.
I'm not saying when it comes to politicians, you don't include, like, JFK would never have been as popular if he wasn't like a good-looking, you know, quite charismatic kind of guy. Same as Obama. Not so much George Bush's, but yeah, but look, I don't disagree that specifically politics is a lot about personality, right? What I'm saying is that if you look at some of the ads that you see in our state, you kind of go, this person's lying. This person took these trips here. This person used this type of company car. This person, rah rah. And you kind of go, well, that's kind of easily provable. Like, if I had a site or something like that that could tell you the fact, that is easily provable. Like,
well, I think what Trevor's hinting at here is that, these decisions we're making are probably not potentially as rational as we would like them to be, right? Like, but to your point, Derek, like, in an ideal world, could there be, and I think actually Twitter started to experiment with this and got some backlash for it, right? But it's like, and Facebook has said that they will do it as well. Okay, like, here's an ad, right? Here's some things that you should know about this ad, right? Or we have determined that this ad may not have some accuracy to it. But I think at its fundamental level, maybe we can agree that not a lot of people trust politics. However, I do think this is where the micro-targeting comes into play, because what is sneaky about propaganda is that you now can figure out what is going to trigger Derek versus what's going to trigger Robin, right? Based on all of that great information that Facebook and YouTube and everybody else has on you, and really cue in on their core issues so that you can get their vote, right? So to me, part of it is like, how can you even acknowledge, or how can we potentially bring it to life algorithmically that, hey, you might be getting triggered right now, right? Like, what if you did see something in Twitter? I mean, my Twitter feed very much leans one way, right? And I don't see a lot of the other side of the argument because of who I've decided to follow and who I've decided to like. But if I could say, hey, Mariah, by the way, like, you're probably about to get triggered by this ad, right? Or if I could tell my brain, oh, am I getting triggered, right? Like, I'm just thinking if there's some way that we can be more conscious consumers of social.
Because it's subtle brainwashing, which is what they talk a lot about in the social dilemma, and how the way that the social platforms were designed were to trigger dopamine. Something as simple as, which now I'm very much aware of, is on Instagram, where it shows you new posts. Like, that one little thing that just keeps you in this rabbit hole of like, keep looking and looking. Like, it purposely doesn't feed you things until you start to scroll down to a certain extent and start to slow down. And then, oh, by the way, there's new content. Great. Let me go back up to that. And then you get a whole new feed of information. So I think, as a population, we need to be educated on what's happening, because, they were admitting that they structured these platforms to trigger dopamine and to keep you there and to keep you looking. And I think one of the things that I thought was really especially haunting was your phone and your devices that were near other people, and what those people were interacting with, and how that impacted what you were looking at, and how you could connect those two to keep it going. I thought was so disturbing, because it's not just me, it's these people around me as well, and connecting with them as well.
Oh, I mean, if you've ever gotten the suggested friend request after you met somebody, you have no mutual friends, and all of a sudden it's like, we think you know this person. It's because you were with that person for an extended period of time, an hour, 2 hours, and Facebook knows it because they've been following your geolocation. And so they're like, you guys must know each other. You guys must have met. You guys went to 3 locations together over the course of 4 hours. So it's not your new suggested friend. And it's not necessarily based on phone number or any other interaction. They know how 2 devices are connected based on location and where you guys are at. There's so much data.
Well, and it's so interesting to me because, I mean, Social Dilemma, yes, absolutely. For anyone that is listening to this, go watch that movie. It'll blow your mind. I deleted Instagram off of my phone immediately after watching it, to be honest with you.
It's disturbing.
Because I was like, wow, I am wasting a lot of my life. And I think one of the what's interesting about that movie is that it's a lot of people that actually were the architects and the founders of the social media platforms and algorithms that we're using today. So they definitely had an insider perspective on it. And I think one of the gentlemen that worked for Facebook said, you know, I was realizing I was hiding in a closet, ignoring my 2 children because I was so busy looking at my social media feed.
What parent hasn't hid from their children in a closet, to be fair?
Well, that's true. That's true. Another issue.
I don't think it has anything like social media. Like, I'm pretty sure.
So there's the consciousness part of it for sure, right? That just like once you see something, maybe you can't ignore it. So like once you know that you're part of a magic trick, let's say, which was what, you know, some of the vernacular that Dilemma used, that certainly seems to be one solution. Derek, to your point, I wonder if there is, like, you know, we're not going to trust the politicians. We're not going to trust social media. I mean, we don't trust them, yet we still obviously buy into the system of government, and we buy into the system of social media. What if there was a third party that came around and said, hey, like, let us do the fact checking for you. We're a .org, we're nonprofit.
Well, funnily enough, like, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to people, but a friend of mine who's a creative, he wanted to pitch this idea. Has anyone heard IBM Watson?
Yeah.
Yeah. He wanted Watson to be the real-time fact checker during a debate.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, and it was like, this is the most third-party, non-partisan platform.
Yeah, non-human.
But non-human platform. But even when he was like kind of talking about it, people were still going, oh, but facts that were inputted into it could have been wrong or partisan and stuff like that. So yeah, because that's the argument. Where's the source of truth? And
well, if he's looking at Google, right?
Yeah.
Who did that when they would stream it a couple years back, or like the last election? I think when they ran a live stream of the debate, they were doing kind of real-time fact checking. But cool.
Yeah, and it depends on which platform you're watching it. If you're watching it on Fox versus CNN, then the person who's telling you that fact, it's their interpretation of that particular fact that was imported by someone who probably has a slight bias anyway. You know,
there's always a bias, yeah.
Always a bias. So you kind of go, well, if there's going to be a third party, and unfortunately, I think this country specifically has the issue of there's an accusation of bias, whatever you do. Like, as soon as someone says, this fact is, and they go, well, that's not a fact. You know, they will put a spin on it. And unfortunately, it's like the last 4 years, it has gotten worse because there's no such thing as a fact anymore.
Right, which is, but I think that social media contributes to that, right? Because you only have the facts that you see, right? And that's part of just being a human, right? We only have the reality that we see. So if we choose to participate in echo chambers, then all we're going to see is what we want to see, or what I guess we deserve to see, depending on how you look at it.
I was watching this article, this thing about QAnon, and how
oh my gosh,
they go down this rabbit hole of QAnon. So once they start looking at one, all of a sudden they're in this echo chamber where everything's feeding into QAnon, like this person, this pizza delivery driver, rah rah rah, this actor, this politician, and all of a sudden everything around them is just everyone's a predator and rah 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 rah, and they can't get out of it. It's every single
it's scary, the brainwashing that's happened with QAnon, and how I saw this whole special the other day. I can't remember, one of the news magazines, which of course is biased, but the fact checking that they did about the QAnon and about how it's 100% horseshit, and that these people are believing this and quitting their jobs and following this, what they're deeming as essentially a cult, and to convincing all these people that, of these prostitution rings. And I mean, it's crazy when you see it for face value, but I mean, I can see how it can manipulate vulnerable people actually even smart people.
I was gonna say, yeah, it can manipulate anyone, right? I mean,
Yeah.
even myself, you guys know me. I don't watch cable news. I don't watch the news really. Like I sometimes am completely clueless as to what's going on. So there's not a broadcast, right? It's not like we're broadcasting information out. And we're not trying to be a socialist country that has only one news source. So, well, I think, okay, we're coming up on time here. Well, how about this, Robin? What advice do you give your kids? I know you've got teenagers. How do you help them navigate these tricky waters?
We had a lengthy discussion about it last night. I think the one glimmer of hope that I told my kids last night was, I've never seen an election like this before. I mean, there's always been the great divide between Republican and Democrat. But I assured them that what they are seeing and what they've been privy to for the last couple of years is so unusual. It's unprecedented. Yes, again, there's the right and left, but never have I seen it like this ever in my lifetime. So I said, I think going forward, I think there's hope that this will die down and this won't be as contentious as it has been this year. That's my Pollyanna 7 hope for the future for them. But I do see the confusion for them. And the other thing that I'm seeing that I think is really, really dangerous are, my older boys who are 17 and 15 saying things like, I don't even want to vote. I don't want to be a part of this. I don't believe any politician that I see or hear, and I want nothing to do with this. So, that to me, of course, like scares me. What's going to happen to democracy when you have manipulated children's minds into thinking like this is so horrible and so awful that I want no part of this, to the point where I don't even want to vote. Like that was one of the most scary things that I think I've heard my children say over the last couple months is I want nothing to do with this. And they're going to move to New Zealand.
we're all going to love Derek. I love that. All right, Trevor, from your perspective, unfortunately or fortunately, maybe more about how the sausage is made, being our digital media expert. What advice would you give young people or adults in order to make more informed decisions out there?
I kind of think a little differently than Robin on that. I think it's only going to get worse. I think if you look at the last handful of elections, it's progressed to this point, and I think Trump has changed the landscape a little bit of what is expected of a politician, and what a politician is both allowed and should or shouldn't do. However, I'm not posing a view, but like, I think there's some good in that angle, and there's some bad, obviously, and it's making it so that you're hearing kind of some of the walls be broken down around some of the politicians, even somebody like Biden, who's saying things and he's being a little more outlandish in some of the things that he's even saying that 8 years ago you would have never heard a politician ever say, on no matter how big of a personality they were, as opposed to like Donald Trump, who is literally a superstar from a personality standpoint. So I think you've now even broken down some of the most historic and respected personalities in politics and made them into, they have to even show face, which I think is only going to make it worse in the future. Not to mention we're coming of age of, now you're getting to a point where, okay, I think it's going to get worse because you have to be 35, 36 to run for president.
Oh, got to be so old.
Well, so what's going to come is, now there's going to be a documentation of your entire lifetime on the internet at some point coming in the future, where you can't hide anything. So a lot of the politicians, they were in politics when social media came about. So they've always been suppressing who they really are, hiding who they really are. They've shown face. Well, when you're a 16-year-old kid and you're going about your life all the way up until you're 20 something, and you're like, hey, I kind of want to go down a political path, you have now this kind of fingerprint of who you are on the internet. And so, like it or not, there's going to be a level of, I know more about you than you'll ever want me to know, because you grew up in the age of social media and just pure digital ecosystem that didn't exist when people like Donald Trump and Joe Biden were coming about. Like, we resurface these conversations from random places and we find old pictures and everyone's like, what is this? What were they doing? But now you're going to go back and you're going to have 35 years of history on a person when they're actually running for office at minimum in the future. And so I think it's going to get 10 times uglier than it currently is, because it's not something that's just you're going to hide from it. But as far as like my advice, I would say, I mean, know that you're being manipulated in some degree, because human nature is going to say that you are receptive. I mean, whether you want to fight it till you're blue in the face, you're being influenced, and it's important to know that. I think there's a lot of sites out there that can help you, that do exist. I know when I filled out my ballot, I was looking at, it's called Colorado Public Radio, and they basically did this whole, if you vote yes for this, what does it mean? If you vote no for this, what does it mean? And it was very, to me, felt like not really, it was very factual. So there's obviously the big ones like the president that you're probably not going to do that for. You probably have already made up your mind. If you haven't, it's still a great resource. But for Colorado specifically, it went through every single issue in detail and said, if you vote yes, this is going to have this repercussion, and therefore this is going to happen. Or if you vote no, this repercussion, and it's going to kind of go this route. And you just think critically. I mean, even when I was going through that, I did it with another person, and we debated almost every single topic. Because
who came up with that though? Like, who produced that bit that you were?
I don't know.
Colorado Public Radio.
It's Colorado Public
Which
Radio.
how do you know that's not biased?
It probably is.
Like, you said that to me earlier. You were like, every kind of thing has a like. I know it was talking about politicians at that time, and this is whatever amendments or whatever within the state. But at the same time, you kind of go, well, this is about personality, but this is, how do you know it's not biased?
I think what helped me was that I debated every single one of them with another person. I know you're not supposed to fill this out with other people, but I did, and it helped, because then it was like, I think that's what helped me prove it was non-biased, because we could look at literally the same words on a website and not agree. It wasn't one way or the other.
Everybody has a different interpretation of it, but at least I think, Trevor, you bring up such a good point. I'm cognizant of time, so I'm keeping us on track, which is, I think one of my biggest piece of advice is don't defriend the people and be willing to have the conversation with people that disagree with you. One of the best ways to get out of an echo chamber is to be willing to hear somebody else's argument and side of the story. Derek, you're not from around here, so we've been told. Any advice you would have as a non-American? I know you're allowed to be here.
Oh,
but
yeah.
having grown up in a different place, maybe a slightly different perspective. But I'm giving you a challenge, which is to answer the question in 2 minutes.
Okay. I personally, like it says, from my point of view, I personally would research as many facts as possible. I am open to hearing both sides of the story. So, for example, not the extreme stuff like QAnon and stuff, but look at the opposing view to whatever issue you're considering is a topical or big issue for yourself, right? Because whatever you look at, there will always be someone opposing you, and you want to know what the reasons are. Now, for example, and then you have to kind of take into your account your actual internal bias. So, for example, if you're not religious, certain things are going to be, not important to you. If you are, certain things are, right? But you have to kind of look at what's the ultimate societal impact of whatever decision is made, whether it's abortion, whether it's social services or healthcare. And I kind of look at like sites like PolitiFact, even though you might suggest that it's biased as well. But look at statistics. Like, numbers don't really lie too often, to be fair. And you kind of go, has there been a healthcare plan? Has there been an increase in personal wealth over the last 4 years? Right? Has there been an increase in jobs? So those kind of things I kind of look at, and then without taking the kind of furore and the commentary that goes with it. If you look at kind of cable news, it's basically commentary disguised as news. Take that away for a second and just go, based on these facts, what do I personally believe? Right? And that's kind of how I would approach it from an outsider point of view.
Oh my gosh, Derek, you won. You have 50
You did it in 1 minute.
All right,
Yeah.
guys, I still have more. I have two more things. Robin, I'm going to give you a little glimmer of hope. because I want to
Please.
to your 7. So you may or may not know, I think you probably do, but the Department of Justice, the DOJ, just filed a suit against Google. And this is what their suit says. 2 decades ago, Google became the darling of Silicon Valley as a scrappy startup with an innovative way to search the emerging internet. That Google is long gone. The Google of today is a monopoly gatekeeper for the internet and one of the wealthiest companies on the planet. So there may be regulation coming. I personally think it's well deserved. But also some interesting takeaways for folks from the social dilemma. These are the guys that invented these social platforms. Here's some advice they have on ways that you can combat this in your life. Again, have the conversation. Be willing to talk to real people in your real life. Go talk to your neighbor what they think. Turn off your damn notifications. Don't let the social algorithms try to pull you back in. Stop using Google, or at least use some other search platforms once in a while. Mozilla is actually a nonprofit, guys. Is it Mozilla? Firefox? Yeah, I think it's a nonprofit. Don't accept the recommended video from YouTube when you're watching YouTube. Fact check before you share. Make sure that you have your facts right before you share a story. Keep in mind, you vote with your clicks, so don't click on something if you don't believe in it. Also, obviously, look for other sources of information. Do follow people you don't like. See what the other side has to say about things. Don't take your phone to bed with you. Don't let your kids have social media until they're 16, and give everybody a time budget. How much time a day do you want to waste on social media platforms? Figure that out as a family or as an individual, and stick to it. So some practical pieces of advice. I ended right on time. Good luck out there, guys. Please make informed decisions if you can. And yeah, that's it for now. Scene.